Well, I think we're in good shape to get started. So I just wanted to thank everyone quickly for taking the time to join us for the SmartCare Remote Management webinar here for our VA customers. So we're going to focus on the Well-Challenge Connect's vital signs monitors and how SmartCare Remote Management can help fit into your organization. So just quickly, as a couple of housekeeping items, I just wanted to introduce myself first and foremost. So I'm Michael Suits. I'm the marketing manager for SmartCare Remote Management, connectivity, and service for our patient monitoring portfolio, supporting the commercial US and downstream market. So I'm very excited to be able to talk about this today and have some time to interface with our VA customers and present some more information about SmartCare Remote Management. At the end of the presentation, we'll be doing a Q&A. So if you have any questions that come up throughout the presentation, you'll see that there's a Q&A section on Teams. So it's a little bit different than the chat, but it's right next to it. But if you click on the Q&A section there, you'll be able to type in your question. And then at the end, I'll be going through and answering some different questions as much as time will allow. And we also may have a couple people available to answer some questions as well in the chat, but hopefully we'll be able to get through most, if not all of those questions. And for the best viewing experience, one tip I would have is if you click on the bottom of the screen where it says Remote Selling Center, there's 3 dots. And if you click on that and then click Fit to Frame, that will give you the best viewing experience because it won't shrink the screen at all just to fit your monitor. It'll have the whole experience here from our selling center here. At the end of the presentation, it won't come out right away, but we'll be sending out a recording as well. So afterwards, if you wanted to go back and listen to any information or share it with colleagues that may not have been able to attend, please feel free to share with them as well. And then lastly, everything we'll be discussing today is on the Well-Challenge Vital Signs NX contract. So that covers everything from SmartCare Remote Management, which we'll be discussing, to the different patient monitor devices, accessories, software, connectivity services. So all of these different items are on the NX contract, which makes the whole ordering process significantly simpler and faster for you as customers instead of having to go through contracting, which can tend to be a longer process. So I just wanted to cover that quickly before we jump into the actual presentation itself. But again, thank you all for joining, and we're excited to jump in here. So first, I just wanted to talk about some of the different challenges that I'm going to go ahead and assume that some of you face on a day-to-day basis, and I'll try to move out of the way here. But first and foremost, we've really kind of grouped these into 3 different categories. So we've grouped it into kind of time, cybersecurity, and then just overall device data and visibility. So as far as time goes, I know your time is stretched very thin, especially when it comes to biomed or clinical engineering or IT. There's a lot of different things going on that require your attention. So understanding that valuable time can be wasted with a lot of these different manual processes is very important to understand and figure out how we might be able to mitigate that and do some of these things in a little bit more of an efficient manner. So whether it's manually going to update different devices physically with the USB stick or having to go find the device in the hospital, for example, where these monitors tend to move around, go to different rooms, different departments. So it can really add a lot of time to your day by having to go and actually track down those devices physically to bring them back to the biomed office, which ultimately takes them out of the care of the patient's room. So time is a really essential piece here. And then moving over to cybersecurity, I mean, this is a very, I would say, popular topic lately, especially in the past 5+ years, and it will only continue to get more and more attention. So really understanding how your patient monitors interact with the network and understanding what vulnerabilities may be out there and how to make it as secure as possible is an important aspect that I think from your perspective, it's a very important initiative. I know, especially for VA customers, how important that is in protecting the data of your patients and caregivers. And then lastly, device data is essential. So there's a whole, especially when you look at the entire fleet of your devices, there's a lot of different information that's important to keep track of. And really having your arms around that can be a big challenge, especially if you're looking at it in different spreadsheets or your CMS platform or different pieces of software. So it's really important to figure out how you can really compile all that information in one place and get a nice clear view of what devices you have and how you can actually manage that fleet of devices. So with that, I wanted to kind of jump forward after talking about those challenges here and really understanding what that means and how we can be here to serve you to make this hopefully an easier process. So SmartCare Remote Management, when we talk about it in this context with patient monitors, is available for these three different devices. So we have the Kinect's Vital Signs Monitor, which is the little bit larger device. We have the Kinect's Spot Monitor, and then on the other side here, we have the Kinect's Integrated Wall System. So those are the three endpoints that we'll be discussing as far as SmartCare Remote Management and how you can actually use this platform to help manage some data and really get a good look at the overall health of your devices. One of the really great things with SmartCare Remote Management is it gives you access to up-to-date device details, including near real-time location. So when you think about that time it takes to go locate a device within the hospital, this can really help simplify that and triangulate exactly where that device is within the hospital. Understanding what required software updates are out there, or just general data to help identify the needed repairs for the different devices within your fleet. And then I'll move over to the other side here, but broadly, when you think about how this platform works with SmartCare Remote Management, for the VA, this is a secure on-prem solution. So the IT infrastructure is in your hands. You have the control of it. And this is basically just a remote access point that you can log into the portal, see the device detail, and really understand what your device fleet, the overall health of that device fleet is. The other nice thing is that this platform scales to fit your facilities management requirements. So whether you have 10 devices or 500 devices, as you add more and more devices, you're able to continue seeing more and more of the device data that you need to see in order to help overall maintenance of the fleet. And then lastly, one important area is that this platform of SmartCare Remote Management, it never interacts with patient health information. This is looking only purely at service data from the device and never any patient information. So it's really important to understand that delineation of patient information versus just the device service data, which is where SmartCare Remote Management land is just the device data. And one other item I'd like to call out too is when you think about overall life cycle or fleet management with these patient monitors, I want you to think about, while we go through the demonstration here in a little bit, how you can manage the overall fleet and understanding the overall life cycle of your patient monitors. I know in the VA system alone, there's thousands of patient monitors out there that have been in use for over 7 years. So knowing that information and how you can understand the performance of your fleet, the data that you can see and really understand the overall usage, how you can use that to make decisions moving forward for, is it time to start refreshing the fleet a little bit, or kind of starting to balance out the devices that are highly used in certain areas. So there's a lot of different valuable information that can be gleaned from SmartCare Remote Management and really understanding what's out there for you. So with that, I'm going to shift over to our touch screen over here and go through an actual live demonstration of the platform so you can understand exactly what capabilities there are and how you might be able to use this within your system. So I'm going to head over. Just going to drop this quick. So here we have what the login screen would look like. Once you actually sign in, this is the first page that you would see, which gives you a couple different tiles of the different devices and locations that you have, along with the actual device count. So in each of these locations, you'll see that we have 50 devices in 2 of these locations, and then 25 patient monitors in that last location. I want you to ignore for a minute the beds, because that's not something that's available with this on-prem version, but just know that it's something that broader is in other areas. So one important thing here also is, as far as users go, you can actually designate roles based on who you want to see, or who you want to be able to see different areas of your overall system. So if you're overseeing 3 different VA hospitals, whereas there's a biomed technician that's in one hospital, you can determine that they can only see that one hospital. So there is some different role-based access that you can determine based on role of the different people within your team. So what I'm going to do from here is click into this first VA Syracuse hospital so that you can see what the menu looks like for the assets themselves. So you'll see over here on the left, there's 4 different tabs. And the first one that you come into is the Assets tab, which gives you some very specific information on the different devices that are connected to your network. So you can see device types. So we've got CSMs and CVSMs. You've got some different status alerts, which we'll dive into here in a minute. But then it also gives different custom labels that are determined by you on your end during the setup process here. So these are med surg, we have ER, a couple different examples. And then you have firmware version, configuration file, asset tab, tag, serial number. So there's all sorts of different information that you can see from this first asset page here when you're looking at the actual platform itself. You can also sort based on the different fields here. So if you wanted to sort by like which devices most recently connected to the network. So this is a demo platform, but you can see that some connected today, while others it's been a longer time since that connection happened. But there's a lot of great flexibility to be able to take a look at it and really sort based on what you need. So this asset page looks at it a little bit more holistically, and we'll jump into some reports later that give a really good holistic overview. But what I wanted to first focus on is diving into some very specific device details and how granular the information is that you can get from that. So I'm going to click into this first one, which you can see has that status icon and some further information that I think you'll find interesting here. So this first example we're looking at is a Connect spot monitor. And you can see from the page that we have a couple different pieces of information that you can first see. So preventative maintenance schedule. You can see that we have a calibration that's due in August coming up here. So that helps your biomed team plan when they may have to do these different services for all the different devices on your fleet. And then other than that, we have all of this very specific information. So asset name, serial number, model number, firmware, you even have MAC address, IP address. So there's all sorts of very specific information with this particular CSM. So I think it's great that you can really dive in and understand what the specific device health is and just get some more information that you may need. The next tab over here, so we have that component information, which you'll see has that same alert that I pointed out in the previous page. And this is specifically calling out a battery issue for this specific CSM. And you can see that because the maximum capacity of this battery is only 16%, it's giving an alert that there's a potential issue with this battery within this CSM and how we can react to that and potentially proactively replace that battery before it continues to disintegrate and become less and less useful on the floor for your clinicians. There's going to be another report later that will show that gives similar information at kind of a rolled up level with multiple different devices. But when you're diving into one individual device, I just wanted to be able to point that out on some of the information you can see. You can also see that there's a lot of different information. I mean, voltage, temperature, battery, I know cycle counts there at the bottom. So all that information is really important to be able to take a look at this specific device. So we're also going to jump into some particular device service information. So with requesting log files, right now today, if you don't have SmartCare Remote Management, what your team is required to do is go physically locate that device, go into the advanced settings, and pull the log file manually from the device itself. With SmartCare Remote Management, you can actually do this remotely. So if I wanted to request the log file for this specific device, I can click that button right from my desktop and have that log file downloaded so that I can send it to like the Baxter, Welch Allyn tech support, for example, to really be able to dive in and troubleshoot this particular device. So that's a great remote capability here with SmartCare Remote Management. The last thing I want to touch on this page is you'll notice that there's a locate button up here in the top right of the screen. So what that locate button does is we have, during the setup process with SmartCare Remote Management, you can set up a file that's uploaded for the access point map for the different access points within your hospital, so that what this does is when you click on locate, this will actually tell you by triangulating it through the AP map is where that approximate location is for this specific device. So where there's value there is if you know you needed to go do a PM, for example, or there's something else that you had to go find this one to get your hands on, instead of just blindly starting and hunting around where you think it may be, you can get a pretty accurate location of where this device can be expected to be found. So it really helps potentially save some time there. So that's kind of a really quick overview of what I wanted to show from the very specific device information. So where I'm going to go now is into some of these different reports that I think you may find value with. So from this menu, you'll see that you can select the different locations. We're just going to stay in VA Syracuse right now as an example. And you can also pick some of the different device types. So originally you saw that we had both CSMs and CVSMs at this location. So both of those items are available there from the dropdown. And the usage report, I think, is one of my favorite reports because it gives you some really great information as far as the overall fleet usage goes and how you can really find value. So we're going to hit Get Report, and you'll see as you scroll down, it gives you some of the location by number of devices on that particular floor. But then as you scroll down, it gives you some very nice rolled up information. I know, like we just mentioned in that specific CSM we were looking at the device data for, with cycle counts, for example, this gives you even more devices all in one view that show all these different, like the battery cycle counts, the Sure Temp thermometer, the NIBP sensor. So all these different counts for the accessories paints a really clear picture, I would say, of how heavily used are these devices. Is there a certain device or group of devices that's being very heavily used as opposed to another group that may be very lightly used? And is there an opportunity to maybe swap those devices to help extend the overall life of the fleet? It all depends on that usage, obviously, but there's definitely some opportunity to be able to balance the fleet out a little bit to hopefully extend the life of those devices. So we're going to scroll back up here, and I'm going to jump to the firmware version report because I think this is one of those things, like as we talked about different security or just understanding what firmware versions are out there on the devices, this is a really important one because it tells you exactly what firmware versions are on them. So if we look at the ER, for example, it's showing that for this firmware version here, we have all 5 of those devices. If there was another version out there, it would show another row with a count of how many devices there were. And the same thing goes for MedSurg. So this is showing that all 20 of those devices have this firmware version, which is a great thing that these are all on the most recent version. But if there were multiple versions out there for these devices, it would show it right there so that you can understand, okay, I need to go and update X, Y, and Z devices to make sure that everyone's on the same version and on the latest version. So the other one I wanted to jump to is, you can see that there's a list here. So configuration update status, firmware status. I'll jump into a couple of these so you can see some of the different views, but this one is somewhat similar to the asset list, but the nice thing here is that you can actually download or print these reports from this menu instead of having to copy and paste or anything like that. So this at least lets you download it in a more digestible fashion. Activity. So this one, again, we mentioned that battery life, the maximum capacity. So this one gives a more holistic view, again, instead of just looking at that one individual device very specifically. This gives you a broader look for this location. Here's what the maximum capacity is for all of these devices, for example, or current charge, battery cycle counts, things like that. So there's a lot of different great information that you can use to roll up and compile into actionable information that you can use and do what you need to with. And again, you can download, print, all those sorts of things. The last one I'll mention here is the CMMS report. So for your CMMS platform, if you use one, this report is able to be downloaded as a CSV that you can then upload into your CMMS platform. So instead of having to do some different manual transcription of typing out serial numbers or typing it into a spreadsheet, this downloads that for you. So it helps eliminate that manual transcription at least. So that's some of the different reports I wanted to touch on. I think there's a lot of value depending on what your actual need is. But there's a lot of information in there that you can at least download or go through to really understand the overall use of your fleet. So this next tab I wanted to touch on is another important area of the overall capability of SmartCare Remote Management. So what this tab is, so the Updates tab lets you choose, again, what specific device you want to be doing any updates to. So we're going to use the Connect Vital Sign Monitor, for example. What this tab does is it allows you to remotely push different updates or files to the devices themselves instead of having to manually go and plug in a USB stick, upload a configuration file, or upload a firmware update. So this is where there's a really great value, I'd say, for SmartCare Remote Management and being able to help manage your time and your team's time. So for this CVSM, what we're going to do here is the configuration file. So I think most people are probably familiar with the configuration files for the Welch Allyn monitors, but what the configuration file does is it basically drives the behavior of that particular device. So if there are certain modifiers that a certain area of the hospital wanted to have, so like the med-surg floor, for example, versus the ER, the behavior of those two devices might be slightly different. And the configuration file is where you'd be able to edit that to make that more customized so that particular hospital or particular area of the hospital. So this is where you can do that. With these different configuration files, you can see that there's 3 different options for me to choose from that we'd want to remotely push to our devices. So in this example, I'm just going to use this first one, and then we're going to hit next. And you can see that it pulls up a list of the available CVSMs that we would be able to push that configuration file to. So I could either choose 1 or 2 devices or multiple, or just click this top box, which then pushes that configuration file to all of them. But in this example, I'm just going to choose a couple different med-surg ones because we're going to assume that the behavior we want in those med-surg monitors is a little different. And we're going to hit next here. And then you'll see that it comes up with an option of immediately pushing that configuration file or scheduling that configuration file push. The way this works is that whether you're doing immediately or scheduled, the update basically goes out to the server and is there waiting until that device calls home the next time. So with immediately, there's a slight differentiation for how the immediately versus scheduled works. So immediately, obviously, as the name might imply, puts it out there. So the next time that calls home, it's going to be grabbing that and asking at the monitor if you want to go ahead and update the configuration. I would say the possible slight advantage of the scheduled push is that once it's received, it will automatically power cycle and apply that update. But one important note to make is that whichever version you're choosing here, it's never going to interrupt any sort of clinical function of the device. Like if it's in use, taking the blood pressure or monitoring a patient, it would only be during a rest period and when that power cycle happens. So it would never interrupt patient care. So we'll just use immediately as an example and we'll hit confirm. And this message comes up quickly, but update process has been established. So that means that it's pushing out to the server and it'll be waiting there for that call home to take place. So it's as easy as that for sending out that remote push for the configuration file. I'm going to jump back again to updates. So as valuable as that is for pushing those configuration files for the CVSMs, there's actually an additional capability with the CSM, the Connect Spot Monitor, is that on top of configuration file updates, you can also remotely push firmware upgrades to the device as well. So again, it's the same exact process. We're just going to choose the 1.52 version here and hit next. And then it's the same thing again. So let's just say that we're going to do these med-surg Connect Spot monitors. We'll hit next. And then again, that same option of immediately versus scheduled will come up. So same process. I'm just going to hit immediately so you can see what that looks like. And it'll give that same message, is that the update process has been established. So again, it's as easy as that for being able to push that remote firmware update and configuration files for the CSM or for the CVSM, remotely pushing that configuration file. So when you think about having to go currently, if you don't have SmartCare Remote Management, going and physically touching every single device, going into the advanced settings, plugging in the USB stick, and doing all those different changes that you want, this gives you the ability to do this remotely. So one other example I failed to mention with the configuration files is that besides the actual clinical function of the device, you can also update some of the network settings. So if there was a network name change or password change, you can do that right in the configuration file as well, instead of, again, going in the advanced settings of each monitor physically by touching it. So there's some great capabilities both on the clinical side, but also the IT and biomed side. So, I mean, I think that really covers a lot of the different areas of the specific product demo that I wanted to show, because it gives all the different pieces, like really understanding the device data, what information is there for you, diving into the individual device level information, or that broader high level information of the entire fleet as a whole at those different locations. And then it also covers some of those different remote pushes, so the configuration files for CVSM and CSM, or those firmware updates for CSM. So a lot of those different capabilities, I think, are really important to be able to address some of those different challenges that we first covered, whether it's the time, the cybersecurity, and just understanding the overall device data as a whole. And again, when you think about that life cycle management, the fleet management, how you can really balance that out across your system or within these different areas of the hospital, and understanding how heavily used they are, and how you might be able to make your fleet more efficient is really important to understand. there's some possibilities there that I think are really worth exploring. So with that, I wanted to jump over to see if there's any questions. I'm going to jump back over to the screen over here. But let's see if we have any questions that I can take a look at here.